What if a war over Taiwan does not begin with missiles over Taipei, but with quiet decisions made on a wind-beaten rock at the edge of the Philippines? That is the uncomfortable question now hovering over Mavulis Island, a place so remote it was once visited more by seabirds than soldiers. For decades, Mavulis symbolized little more than a flag planted at the country's northernmost edge. Today, it sits on the front line of one of the most consequential geopolitical scenarios of the 21st century. The Taiwan Strait has re-emerged as a global danger zone. China's pressure campaign against Taiwan, marked by near-daily air incursions, missile drills, and naval encirclement rehearsals, has turned abstract strategy into lived reality. Taiwanese radar operators now track Chinese aircraft as routinely as weather systems. What once felt hypothetical now feels rehearsed. And when great power rivalry shifts from theory to tempo, geography stops being neutral.
This is where Mavulis quietly enters the picture.
Sitting astride the Batanes-Taiwan Channel, the island lies along the natural seam connecting the Philippine archipelago to Taiwan's southern approaches. In peacetime, it is a dot on a map. In crisis, it becomes a sensor node, a logistics waypoint, and a strategic constraint, whether Manila wants it to be or not. Geography, after all, does not ask for permission. Other regional states have already learned this lesson the hard way. Japan has fortified its southwestern islands, transforming Yonaguni and Miyako into forward defense hubs. The United States has repositioned forces across Okinawa and Luzon to complicate Chinese operational planning. Even Australia, thousands of kilometers away, has reoriented its force posture around a Taiwan scenario. Compared to these moves, the Philippines' northern frontier looks quiet, but quiet does not mean irrelevant.
The difference is choice.
Japan planned for its geography. Australia adapted to distance. The Philippines, by contrast, inherits proximity. Mavulis Island places Manila closer to a Taiwan contingency than any Southeast Asian capital, and closer to the consequences of escalation, alliance activation, and retaliation. It is not just a strategic asset, it is a strategic responsibility. In this new Indo-Pacific reality, Mavulis Island forces a hard reckoning. It anchors the Philippines at the crossroads of deterrence and diplomacy, alliance solidarity, and national autonomy. What happens there will not simply reflect Philippine policy. It will shape how any future Taiwan crisis unfolds across the region.
Mavulis Island does not look powerful on a map. It is small, rocky, uninhabited, and exposed to some of the harshest weather in the Philippine archipelago. Yet geography is rarely about size, it is about position. Lying roughly 140 kilometers south of Taiwan and just 60 kilometers north of Itbayat, Mavulis occupies a narrow maritime corridor where regional stability would either hold or fracture during a crisis. Physically, the island offers little comfort. There are no permanent facilities, no sheltered harbors, and no civilian population. Typhoons regularly batter its cliffs. But modern conflict does not reward comfort, it rewards awareness. Elevated terrain on even the most austere outcrop can host radar, signals intelligence equipment, and maritime domain awareness sensors. In an era defined by missiles, aircraft, and drones, early warning matters more than mass. As one Philippine defense analyst aptly put it, geography that detects the fight often matters more than geography that fights it. Mavulis' true value lies in what it can see. The waters around it connect the Pacific Ocean to the South China Sea, forming a natural passageway for naval and air traffic moving between Taiwan and Luzon. From this vantage point, air movements, surface vessels, and even subsurface activity can be tracked with line-of-sight relevance. In a fast-moving contingency, minutes of early warning can mean the difference between escalation and control. Strategically, Mavulis sits squarely inside the first island chain, the arc of islands stretching from Japan through Taiwan and the northern Philippines down toward Borneo. This chain is not symbolic. It is a structural constraint on Chinese power projection. Whoever monitors it effectively shapes access between China's near seas and the open Pacific. It limits maneuverability, complicates operational planning, and increases the transparency of military movement. Importantly, Mavulis is not designed to be an offensive launchpad. Its role in a Taiwan contingency would be quieter and arguably more consequential. It would function as a sensor node and signaling point,
feeding information into a broader Allied picture of the battle space. Japan has its southwestern islands. Taiwan has its coastal radars. The Philippines, whether intentionally or not, contributes to Mavulis. This is where geography becomes destiny. Unlike other regional actors that can choose distance or ambiguity, the Philippines inherits proximity. Mavulis Island does not drag Manila into great power competition by policy choice. It does so by latitude and longitude. And in the Indo-Pacific's emerging security order, that makes this forgotten rock one of the most strategically honest pieces of ground the Philippines possesses.
For most of modern Philippine history, Mavulis Island existed more as an idea than a position. It marked the edge of the republic, a quiet punctuation point at the northern end of the archipelago. Its purpose was symbolic, proof of sovereignty, a fixed reference for maritime boundaries, a reminder that the Philippines extended farther north than most people realized. Beyond that, it asked little of Manila and received little in return. This neglect was not accidental. For decades, Philippine defense priorities were inward-looking. The armed forces of the Philippines were consumed by counterinsurgency, internal security operations, and disaster response. Resources were scarce, threats were domestic, and distant rocks in the Batanes Sea did not appear on strategic whiteboards. Patrols around Mavulis were sporadic, functional, and largely administrative. The island was defended by presence, not posture. That era is over.
The strategic environment around the Philippines has shifted faster than its geography ever could. China's naval expansion, now the largest in the world by hull count, has transformed nearby waters from peripheral zones into contested spaces. PLA air and naval activity around Taiwan increasingly spills southward into the Luzon Strait, erasing the comfortable buffer that once separated Northeast Asian flashpoints from Southeast Asia. What used to feel far away is now uncomfortably close. Recent history has also delivered hard lessons. Ukraine demonstrated that seemingly marginal territories, borderlands, islands, corridors can become decisive when great powers collide. Early warning, access denial, and control of movement mattered as much as massed forces. For Philippine planners watching these conflicts unfold, the implication was unavoidable. Ignoring geography does not make it irrelevant.
This realization has forced a reassessment of places like Mavulis.
What was once a forgotten boundary marker is now understood as a fixed asset in an increasingly fluid security environment. Mavulis did not gain strategic value because it changed. It gained value because the world around it did. Neutrality sounds clean in theory. Geography makes it unrealistic in practice. The northern Philippines sits beside the Luzon Strait Bashi Channel, one of the main air and sea gateways between the Pacific and the South China Sea. Any Taiwan crisis would spill into this corridor regardless of Manila's intentions. First, air and maritime friction is unavoidable. High-tempo operations expand flight routes, patrol zones, and intercept patterns.
Northern Luzon is too close to guarantee uncontested airspace,
forcing the Philippines to patrol, identify, and deconflict even under a neutral posture. Second, economic exposure is immediate. Indo-Pacific sea lanes carry a dominant share of global trade. Even limited disruption would raise shipping costs, energy prices, and insurance premiums, directly hitting Philippine consumers and exporters. Third, human movement becomes a real pressure point. With a large Filipino population in Taiwan, evacuations or refugee flows would funnel toward Batanes and northern Luzon, stressing ports, airstrips, shelter, and basic services. Fourth, cyber and gray zone pressure is likely. Network intrusions, GPS interference, and information operations target proximity and relevance, not formal belligerence. Finally, international law creates a bind. States must not allow their territory to be used for harmful acts against others. In a Taiwan contingency, Manila would face pressure from both allies and China.
Mavulis is not a spear. It is eyes and warning. One role is ISR, compact radar and passive sensors, extending detection across the Batanes-Taiwan corridor, improving early warning and decision time. Another role is humanitarian and evacuation support, relay functions for refueling, communications, staging, and emergency response during evacuations or maritime disruption. A third role is early warning and signaling. Even modest sensors can provide minutes that matter for posture, messaging, and crisis control. The risk is perception.
Because Mavulis is geographically prominent, even limited activity can be read as forward alignment, increasing escalation risk. The core dilemma is simple: how to gain awareness and resilience in the north without turning a sovereign rock into an escalation magnet. That balance defines the Philippine challenge in any Taiwan contingency.
At the core of the alliance sits the Mutual Defense Treaty, a Cold War document that suddenly feels very modern again. Signed in 1951, the treaty commits both countries to act in response to an armed attack on each other's forces, aircraft, or territory in the Pacific. The language is firm, but the application is deliberately elastic. That elasticity is now being stress-tested by Taiwan scenarios. The uncomfortable truth is that the MDT does not name Taiwan. It does not spell out gray zone thresholds. It does not define whether a missile flying near Philippine airspace, a cyber attack on northern infrastructure, or a clash involving allied forces transiting nearby waters qualifies as an armed attack. This ambiguity is not accidental. Washington has long relied on strategic ambiguity to deter aggression without locking itself into automatic escalation.
What has changed is tone.
Recent U.S. statements increasingly emphasize readiness, interoperability, and contingency planning, signals meant to deter without provoking. For Manila, this creates both reassurance and uncertainty. The alliance is strong, but the decision space in a Taiwan crisis would still be narrow, fast-moving, and politically costly. If the MDT is the legal backbone, Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement is the operational muscle. Under EDCA, the Philippines has granted U.S. forces access to 9 agreed locations, several of them in northern Luzon, close enough to the Batanes-Taiwan corridor to matter in any contingency. Mavulis Island itself is not an EDCA site, and that distinction matters. But proximity is power. The existence of nearby EDCA locations amplifies Mavulis' relevance without requiring permanent basing on the island.
EDCA enables pre-positioning of equipment,
Infrastructure upgrades, and rotational U.S. presence, all of which reduce response times in crises ranging from evacuations to natural disasters to conflict spillover. In this sense, Mavulis Island operates as an indirect force multiplier. It does not host forces, it enhances the value of forces elsewhere. Quiet geography, leveraged through alliance architecture. Right now, the northern Philippines is strategically important, but thinly covered. Mavulis has no permanent military presence. ISR coverage remains uneven, and air and missile defense in the north is limited. These gaps are not signs of neglect. They are legacies of a defense posture long oriented inward. Closing them does not require turning Batanes into a fortress. In fact, doing so would likely backfire. What is needed are smart defensive investments: mobile sensors, resilient communications, redundancy, and rapid repair capability. The goal is awareness and resilience, not intimidation. This is where the balance becomes delicate. Too little preparation invites coercion. Gray zone pressure thrives on weakness and ambiguity. Too much visibility, however, risks provocation. China's pattern in the South China Sea offers a clear warning. Maritime militia, coercive patrols, and calibrated pressure exploit seams without crossing clear red lines. For the Philippines, the challenge is not matching China ship for ship or base for base. It is denying easy leverage while avoiding symbolic moves that escalate perception faster than capability. Any strategy involving Mavulis must pass through domestic politics. Filipino public opinion strongly supports defending sovereignty, especially in maritime disputes. At the same time, there is deep sensitivity to foreign troop presence, shaped by colonial history and the memory of permanent U.S. bases. That tension means secrecy is not a strategy. Effective policy requires transparency, legislative oversight, and honest public engagement. Filipinos are more likely to support preparedness when it is clearly framed as sovereign defense, not subcontracted security. For Batanes communities, geopolitics is not abstract. Fishing, tourism, and daily life could be disrupted by heightened tensions. Evacuation planning, disaster preparedness, resilient ports, airstrips, and communications matter as much as radars and patrols. Civil defense is not an add-on, it is credibility. Beijing is unlikely to see enhanced activity near Mavulis in isolation. It will be read as part of a broader U.S. alignment strategy, what Chinese analysts often describe as containment.
responses may not be kinetic. Diplomatic pressure, economic signaling, and increased patrols are more likely first moves. That makes calibration essential. Every action around Mavulis sends a signal, not just to allies, but to adversaries watching for patterns. Outside the alliance, reactions will diverge. Japan and Australia increasingly frame Taiwan's stability as inseparable from regional security. ASEAN, by contrast, remains cautious, emphasizing neutrality and dialogue, testing its cohesion as tensions rise. The Philippines sits between these worlds. Treaty ally to Washington, Southeast Asian neighbor to cautious partners, and frontline state by geography alone.
For Manila, the path forward is narrow but navigable. Prioritizing defensive ISR, civil defense, and infrastructure resilience strengthens sovereignty without inviting escalation. Clear articulation of red lines and crisis protocols reduces miscalculation, not just with adversaries but with allies as well. For partners, the lesson is restraint with support. Capacity building beats militarization. Transparency beats surprise. Deterrence works best when it is boring, predictable, and defensively framed. Mavulis Island is not important because of what sits on it. It is important because of what it represents. Once peripheral, it now reflects the Philippines' evolving role in Indo-Pacific security, caught between geography and choice, alliance and autonomy, deterrence and restraint. Geography cannot be changed, but policy can decide whether geography becomes a trap or a stabilizing asset in an increasingly unstable region.
If you like the video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe our channel for deep analysis of contemporary issues.